everyone. Welcome to part 2 of our AI webinar series, From Workflow to Impact, integrating AI across the event lifecycle. I have a few things for you guys before I get started. One is, if you're hearing that this is a AI webinar series for the first time, feel free to go back to the registration website and watch part 1, and then also be on the lookout for part 3, which will be coming soon in December. So very excited about this series and to talk more about AI, why we're here today, why I'm here today. My name is Brittany Fisher, and I'm a team lead on the product marketing team. So my role is taking our product development and making sure that they resonate with our customers just like you, and making sure the message hits and that we are building the right things to really solve your challenges and pain points. So I have focused on our registration platform in the past, and more recently, I have helped launch Cvent IQ, which is our AI and intelligent solution, which is why I'm here today. I have been knee deep in AI for the last couple of years, and I love talking about it, and I love getting to chat with other people who are in it every single day. So I have two wonderful co-speakers here, and I will introduce them in a minute, but I just wanted to take a moment to take a step back and set the stage for why we're here today. We know that AI is a critical topic for meeting and event leaders right now. Everyone's talking about it. I literally just came from a meeting with our CEO where he was saying that every board meeting that he's in, every meeting that he's in, they're talking about AI. So let's talk a little bit about what's happening with AI. AI is rapidly transforming the meeting and events landscape, and we're really shifting from moving from isolated tools to more of those embedded collaborative agents that can really drive efficiency, personalization, and allow for more strategic decision making. And as I mentioned, leaders, like our leaders, are under a lot of pressure to do more with less. I'm sure that we've all been feeling with it. There's more pressure to demonstrate that ROI and to scale personalization. And that's where AI is really a perfect fit. It can offer ways to streamline new workflows and unlock new value. At Cvent, personally, we are evolving from that traditional event management software to really thinking about becoming a holistic MarTech platform. We're integrating AI and other intelligent features across the entire event lifecycle with Cvent IQ, which I mentioned a couple minutes ago. Cvent IQ brings together AI with decades of Cvent's proprietary event data and industry expertise to deliver smarter, more personalized, and more efficient event planning and attendee experiences. And internally, we have a lot of pressure to use AI. And so we have been talking over the last year of how we can create systematic changes to navigate rolling out AI across the enterprise organization and empowering our employees to test AI and become more AI literate. And we know that many others may be facing this pressure too. That's why we wanted to talk about this shift. How can we help shift from that individualistic AI approach to more of the enterprise approach and help other organizations? Because we know that this is a journey that we're all on together. We're all learning AI and deploying AI across the organization, especially while people have varying degrees of AI knowledge, and trying to figure out how to drive adoption and drive real results, get those numbers, prove that ROI is challenging. So we all are trying to shift our mindset from AI as a tool to for improving productivity to that systematic deployment across the team. And many people see those individual benefits with ChatGPT, but get stuck on the holistic enterprise expansion approach, which is why I really wanted to bring in my wonderful co-speakers, Logan, Downey, and Mary Kluck from our Cvent consulting team, because they talk to our customers every single day about topics just like this. So I'd love to turn it over to you guys to introduce yourselves.
Thank you, Brittany. So happy to be here. Good morning, good afternoon. Hello, everyone. My name is Mary, and I'm a director with Cvent Consulting. we work with organizations to help them apply their business objectives to the software like Cvent and to their implementations, ensuring that they get the most value out of the investment in a tech platform. And so AI is something that we talk about all the time. Logan, I'll pass it to you to introduce yourself.
Sure. Hi, everyone. Thanks so much. Good to be with you today. Mary and I co-lead Cvent Consulting, which is a practice within the consulting organization, focused primarily on helping our clients really meet the needs of where they are today. But really, we wanted to talk to you today about AI. And Mary and I have been traveling all around the world, talking to our clients. And so we have a little bit of information to share with you.
Great. Thank you both. For those of you watching and listening, I'm just going to ask Mary and Logan some questions, and they're going to share some of their experiences. So let's start with something simple, easy. How are you seeing your clients currently using AI in their event programs today?
That's a great question. And so actually, funny that Logan mentions the traveling. I don't know, this is not a virtual background. This is a real background. I am actually traveling with a client today, and AI is top of mind for them. What they have struggled to do very candidly is adopt AI at every discrete point along the meeting and event lifecycle, along the process. And so that's what we're working with them to do. Where I see them using AI today is in the tasks that I think most people are confident using AI with, which is helping to refine text. So putting in some language and then asking AI to help reformat that for a different lens, or to apply more of a different persona to it. So I think helping to rewrite some content or basic session descriptions, that's where I see people use AI very confidently, but in the more impactful, like real automation, I don't think that we're seeing organizations do that at scale. But Logan, defer to you on what else you're seeing.
Sure. I'm seeing a lot of conversations around kind of budgeting and forecasting. So taking year over year data and being able to look at the kind of data-driven analytics in that space. Again, when we're thinking about who we want to target or the audience that we want to speak to, I am seeing people utilize softwares to kind of segment the audiences so they can really hone in on the message. And then to Mary's point, when you're thinking about content that needs to be created, whether that be sessions descriptions or email campaigns or a breadth of emails, right? Your know before you go, things like that, tasks that are repeatable, that can feel time consuming, anything that you can apply kind of a best practice or a standardization across the organization, something that can be quick, is where we're seeing them utilize the software today.
I like that. I like that budgeting approach. I feel like it's starting to think about it as less of an individualistic thought and more of incorporating AI across the organization. With that, and Mary, you kind of hit on this already, but what challenges do you see with people adopting AI and organizations adopting AI right now?
So I think that most organizations, and you mentioned this with our CEO hearing about it in board meetings, AI is the number one priority at the top down level. So the powers that be within an enterprise organization are saying use AI, but they're not then instilling confidence in how and where to use AI. And so it's up to the individual to take the onus on themselves. And they've got a very busy day. A lot of meeting planners are traveling. They've got a lot of other tasks to understand what AI works well and in which context and in which use case. And so I think there's a struggle in terms of the change management and the adoption. Like I think organizations want to equip their workforce with tools to be faster, smarter, more productive, reduce the non-value added tasks, but are missing that really critical layer of how does this apply to me in my role and what is the benefit it will give for me.
Yeah, I was just going to add. So I was sitting with a client just the other day at dinner, and we were talking about this topic. And it was interesting, just to Mary's point, he had his team take time in a team meeting, right, to sit down and say, what are the tasks that you are doing every single day? And where are your most time consuming tasks? And is there an application to utilize AI? In addition to that, I think what's really interesting is he's also, everyone's doing training, everyone's trying to learn how to write the appropriate prompts. That's great. But he's also kind of established a prompt library that their team shares. So they will talk about what are you trying to solve or what are you trying to do and what was the prompt that was used, just as a starting point for those people who may or need a little bit of help, right? Or just a better education on how to utilize the tool. It's just there as a repository of information that people can pull from. So it's been very helpful for his team. He also has a challenge of, bring the latest, greatest, most wonderful prompt to the next meeting, right? So he does kind of pick on one or two people to say, kind of, what are you doing? So again, trying to make it fun as well in the day-to-day activities.
I love that. I love the making it fun, because we all have more time for things that we actually enjoy, or we'll make more time for things that we actually enjoy. But I think it's so true. I was on a webinar like a year ago, and someone asked the question, like, how do we start with AI? What kind of skills should we know when starting with AI? And the speaker was like, you don't need to know anything. AI is like, you can ask AI how to use AI. Like, inherently, it should be something that it teaches you. And I was like, that's great in theory, but there is a learning curve, and we all have to spend that time trying to figure it out. Like, I would love to AI just do it automatically, read my mind, know what I'm thinking, but that's not where we're at today, and we do need to spend that time, and organizations need to make that time for their employees to learn this new technology, because it is such a learning curve.
Yeah, I would also say it's really important to use it as a framework, right? So we know that it's not infallible. It's pulling information. It may be, somewhat accurate or directionally accurate, but it is important to kind of really take the time to use it as a framework and then kind of QC it as well. So I would say, while it can speed up certain tasks, it's not a copy, cut, and paste. It's not a rinse and repeat. It is a framework, review, digest, and then move forward with whatever the activity is. So I think that is really important. And I think that there's this kind of feeling that you can just do the rinse and repeat, and that's not really accurate, right? So we're not trying to, take away anybody's job responsibilities. What we're trying to do is amplify those capabilities and also kind of reduce the manual workload. So I think it's really important to kind of think about it as a tool in your toolkit to get you closer to the finish line faster, but it does still require some review and some work.
And I think that would be misleading. That's part of the change management, or how this is marketed within organizations. It should not be a panacea, like it will solve everything immediately. Like, there is, as you said, Logan, a learning curve. And Brittany, to your point, it's not going to just be able to understand your brain immediately and create something beautiful. It requires back and forth. There are teams that will have, like, no meeting Mondays or no meeting Wednesdays, or we'll have like dedicated blocks of time for professional development. And I've heard of an organization who has created an entire day for everyone in the company to take the time to do once a quarter, like, professional development on a particular topic area. And so focus on AI. So it's very intentionally, like, we're not going to have meetings today. The rest of your work priorities, like, we are asking you, we know, like, from leadership, we are setting this aside. And we really want designated time and space for you to be able to spend the time to learn and invest in this. I think that we're not far away from where AI will be considered a core competency in annual reviews and in how you go to look for your next job in a career. So it's very important that we are given this time, or we make this time, as you said, Brittany.
Yep. I love that, because as we've talked about, and Logan, you were hitting on this, that event planners are so busy. No one has time to learn. So it really is the organizations being like, if you're going to make this from the top down a priority, then you have to make the time for us to learn and make it a priority. Mm-hmm. So with that, thinking about it, how do you think leaders should decide what parts of their workflow and what areas to automate when it comes to AI?
That's a great question. So I think it's really important, if you haven't taken the time to really map out what your event lifecycle is for the events that you are putting on. And I recognize that organizations put on a number of events, right? So just think about it from a very personal lens. If you're hyper focused on a certain type of meeting, how do you do what you do? And then being able to go through each aspect of that event life cycle and identify, is there an easier, quicker, faster way for me to do this task or activity? Is there something that's not inherently, in my realm of activities? Data analysis, right? All of our planners are doing data analysis all the time. But if I have to have 2 spreadsheets or 4 spreadsheets up and I'm trying to, run pivot tables and do all of the, fancy formulations, if somebody else could do that for me and give me an output that all I have to do is check, like that could save me personally hours, right? So just think about those sorts of things that you can do across the life cycle, and then also benefit to the organization. So what is your leader going to be asking and tasking you to do? What do you need to manage your business, right? Or the event, the specific event. And then does that then trickle down to other resources, suppliers, or vendors that you're working with as well? So how do you kind of look across the total portfolio of meetings that you do, the event life cycle for the specialized events that you put on, and then just identifying those opportunities and then testing it, right? So to Mary's point, don't think that it's just going to be this blanket fix, right? Go in and say, this week I really want to look at my forecasting for year-over-year budgeting purposes, right? Pull your reports, throw them in AI, and try and work on one aspect at a time. So take a phased rollout and give yourself grace as you're going through it, I think is what I would share.
I totally agree. I think the decision matrix is a helpful complement to what you described, Logan, and it actually goes back to what you said at the very beginning of the conversation when the gentleman you were having dinner with about plotting all of the tasks across the life cycle. So I think that is really the immediate next step, actionable recommendation for anyone on the call is to plot out what are the jobs to be done across the events that you are responsible for. And then you can carve them into what are the more routine tasks. Those are typically good candidates for leveraging AI versus what requires more creativity, which might also require additional teams and stakeholders. And then what is the strategic, thoughtful, very intentional work that we do. And that would help you guide when and where you could start with those testing situations that Logan described.
Yeah, I think one of the things that I would also just recommend, because we've been in, like we were saying, some meetings, and I was in a meeting the other day where they were talking about routine tasks, no problem, as long as they are remaining secure, private, and compliant, right? Yep. So if you're in an environment where there's kind of regulatory restrictions, or you have compliance team members who have to review content, when you start getting into those kind of medium or low areas on the matrix, that creative work may be in question, right? So I would also say leverage the technologies that you deploy today, whether that be Cvent, your MarTech stack, your Microsoft suite of products, whatever your sanctioned, approved AI tool is, and the tasks that you're allowed to deploy, right? Work on those. If you need to leverage other teams, like Mary was saying, they can probably support you in their AI tools if you don't have access to them. So again, it's knowing where to go for what and what makes the most sense. For
Logan, so one last thing on that. People talk often about the human in the loop, and I think that's really critical. Just because you're using AI to automate these things does not mean that there should be a human touch or human oversight, particularly in a regulatory environment. Mm-hmm. So I think that's very important to keep in mind. And when you have this, great view of all of the tasks, just because you can automate it because you had been doing it doesn't mean that you necessarily should. So it's a great opportunity to also go back to the drawing board and say, okay, we've been executing this process or this task for so many years. Not just can we do it faster, but do we even need to do it at all? So it's a great opportunity to really think about your workflows and the way that you approach your day-to-day.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I love that. You guys hit on so many great points there in terms of the routine tasks being a great place to start. And but what I think is an interesting thing is this allows us to take a step back and look at everything that we're doing and everything on our plate. And instead of just rinse and repeat, as many of us do, as we do with our internal events, sometimes it's oh, well, we've done it the last 3 years. We don't have very many times to take a step back and be is this working? And is this something that we should worth continuing, we should automate with AI, or should get rid of altogether. So
yeah, you're primed to hit the refresh and reset button on everything you do, and it will move mountains for you personally in your day-to-day workload as well.
Yeah, and hopefully that's an exciting thing to take a step back and be like, oh, maybe I don't need to do everything anymore.
Yes.
But I think you guys also hit on a very important piece, and I'm kind of throwing this at you, but in terms of like the regulatory processes and the data security, what are you seeing in terms of your customers balancing feeling this internal pressure to use AI and maybe the pressure to stay compliant and that AI might not be safe or secure? And how are they handling some of that?
I would just say in preparation for this, Mary and I were talking, and we both kind of came back to this same kind of core point, which a lot of our enterprise clients have some type of AI council, right? Some type of committee, some type of internal governance around AI. And right now, everyone's so excited about it, and they want you to use the tools that have been sanctioned, right, and allowed to be used internally. So they want you to use it, you're using it. But then when you start to evolve and grow in that space, maybe you want to build an agent, maybe you want to do something a little bit more sophisticated, right? That's when going to the AI council and being able to communicate what it is you want to do, what you have built, why it was built, and getting it approved is something that we're seeing a lot of our clients put into practice today as well. Mary, I know you've had some recent conversations about AI councils as well. Do you want to share anything that you've learned too?
Yeah, so Logan, and as Logan said, we primarily work with enterprise organizations. So respect that all of you on the call might not have like a governance board of an AI council across multiple regions. And so if you don't, we can talk about that. But the AI council, what we are seeing more and more is that these cross-functional teams who comprise obviously technology, but compliance and risk, they are moving to a use case model. And that just further substantiates why it's important for you to understand all of and be able to articulate what is the work that you do across your day-to-day. And we are obviously using the meeting and events lifecycle as a proxy for what you do, but there's a lot of other tasks that you do outside of planning, meeting, and events. And if you take the similar approach to understand this is the use case that I have for AI, it's more likely to be received in this council so that it is not a blanket, yes, we are able to use AI, no, we are not able to use AI, and parse out for these individuals who might not understand the meetings and events industry or might not understand your team where you sit as clearly. It will make it much more smooth. So doing that like translation work for the cross-functional teams has been very important.
Yeah, and I think the only that I would add is that, you know, if you don't have a team currently developed internally within your organization, you putting some type of governance structure in your immediate team, right? Yeah. How do you want to deploy it? How is it best used? What do you all want to check with one another on or discuss or get kind of buy-in or approval? We also hear a lot of times that our clients are leveraging multiple AI tools, right? Yes. So they're embedded and threaded throughout the technology which your organizations have invested in. So if it is turned on and you are able to utilize it, then leverage that to help your day-to-day. But I would just say if you don't have, you know, if you're not sitting in a large enterprise organization and you don't have an AI council yet, totally fine. Just try and govern how you and your team want to utilize the tool moving forward.
I think that's great. I think that while we have an AI council here internally at Cvent, which I've learned a lot from, it's like you can take, whether you have that or not in an enterprise or a smaller organization, you can take a lot of those same sentiments and see if you can employ them in smaller ways in terms of using your sanction tools or asking the right questions when going through a new procurement process with a new AI vendor in terms of how do they use your data? How do they store your data? How do they train your models? So wherever you can build out those processes and then create the human element within those processes as well? Where is the human check and balance? And not just reading content, but just making sure, like vetting vendors or vetting content before it goes out to your attendees or other people. So I think it's like mapping out those processes and then that human element as well. Are you guys seeing a lot of, when you're mapping out other things, like mapping out these processes, how are you seeing that human element being infused into the use of AI or new technology in general?
So I would tell you that oftentimes when our large core audiences, like the meeting planners themselves, they are required and it is desired that they develop this personalized human element for these in-person or hybrid or virtual events. So for us, it is, again, taking what you are receiving from AI and then really making sure, does this fit? Is there going to be a personal connection? Is this personal connection correct, right? Is it accurate? Is it meeting the needs of the group that I'm trying to, target? Things like that, just being able to just take it, tweak it, refine it, and then just making sure that there is that kind of human element to it so that it's not just jargon. There's not a whole bunch of M dashes, all the obvious things that we keep hearing about. If it's, supposed to be more personal or more formal, like just being able to just put your own touch on it, I think is what's really critical when you're utilizing it in a way that's going to be more attendee facing.
And also like in line with what your company's brand is. Like if you work in a regulated industry, or if you have a very jovial, like customer friendly, if you're B2B organization or B2C, that often determines what your position and how you go to market is. So it would determine the language that you use. So it's important that anything that is being written externally still aligns with the way that your brand resonates in the market.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's a great point. And while you can train these models to be on brand a bit, I agree. I think there's so much of it that still not perfect. It comes out really jargony. I saw something on LinkedIn yesterday that like those terms like unlock that we're seeing all the time drives down conversions by like 17%. And don't quote me on that. I don't know where I saw that, but it's, people are getting used to seeing those AI terms and seeing those M dashes and being like, whoa, it wasn't a human element. I don't want that. And we are in the business of human connection, as our CEO always says, and it's just, you can't lose that personal touch and that personal experience. And so that's where I really feel like event planners' jobs will never be replaced, because they're the creative ones. They're the ones you're meeting with every single day to create that, oh my gosh, I've never felt like this event was made for me before.
Yeah, I think it's, I think my father always says something like, he's, read it in one of a variety of publications, but it's like, people always remember you for the way you made them feel, right? And so I just think that, like, yes, this technology is outstanding. It can take spreadsheets and aggregate them in ways that can make my life 1,000 times, better, right? But when I'm thinking about putting on the event, let's task that kind of routine stuff that needs to happen, or the more administrative type stuff to that. But then that allows you as a meeting planner to really focus on making people feel what you want them to feel in that moment when they're being educated, informed, and inspired to do something different.
Yeah, I think that's great. A great point. Okay, so next I want to move on to, and we've kind of talked about this, but when you're thinking about implementing AI into your organization as a whole and from an enterprise standpoint, are there certain KPIs that we feel like event leaders should be thinking about when measuring AI's impact? I know personally we're still struggling to figure out how to prove the impact of AI within our organization.
I think that most organizations are struggling with how to prove the impact. Like that's what's been in the headline in the news lately. Organizations have spent a lot of money, but it's either not being utilized or they're not sure how to justify the return on the investment for AI spend. Most of what I've heard so far is in either the time to value from learning how to use an AI tool, so something that is going to have like a training element, but more so it is in the efficiency. Like, what is the turnaround time between tasks that you can now complete? So trying to measure this discrete task or routine way to source used to take 5 emails back and forth, and then that 72 business hours. Now it is automated with a workflow and human in the loop at the very end within 24 hours. So that like duration of task is what I see most of the time from an efficiency standpoint, but I think we have a lot of work to do to really understand what the best metrics and KPIs could be. Logan, I don't know if you've heard anything different.
No, I would just say, just to put a finer point on it, for those duration analytics, right, that you have that maybe you're already operating on. So, the average of like, it takes me 17 hours to fully source from, initial RFP send to contract signature, 17 hours for me to complete that task for this one event type. I'm just giving you an example. There are always variances, as we know. But if you were to take that kind of baseline understanding now and then start to apply AI and really for like a couple weeks, just track it, hit a timer, something like that, something that can kind of inform, is this helping me or is it not helping me, so that you can have those conversations internally with your teams. It does take time, right? It takes time for us to learn this tool. It takes time for us to understand how it is impacting our day-to-day, but it might be helpful to just kind of think about some of your benchmarks that currently exist today, and then apply AI for a concentrated period of time. 2 weeks is really short, but I'm just giving you some averages, right? And just see if the time is different for you.
I love that. I think the time savings is a great way to start, especially with people who are stretched on time all the time. But I know that we're taking it internally like a step above that too, in terms of like, okay, so if you save 5 hours on this, like you mentioned, and my employee makes X salary, so this is worth X amount of their time, like saving 5 hours of their time saves us X amount of money. And then you keep taking that up of like, oh, it takes 17 employees are working on this, and you save that amount of time and that amount of money. And then you can really get to that ROI calculation, even if it's just from time saves of, we invested $50,000, but we're saving $70,000 worth of time. And so we really are getting $20,000 worth of ROI.
Yeah, I would also kind of reframe it in a little bit of a way where you could do that. That's absolutely fine. But I would also try and think about it from the lens of just outside of time, but just the ability for that person to then perhaps hyper concentrate on something of greater value. So you can apply the time piece, and yeah, there's a savings to it, but then being able to tie in the human element piece to say, but because I carved off 5 hours, I can now really hyper focus on this aspect of the program and what we're trying to deliver. To me, that's another way to kind of demonstrate ROI. Or could you take on more volume? So I'm not trying to add anything more to anybody's plate. But again, if I take some of those hours off, could I take on perhaps another smaller meeting, right? Or could I take something else, on? So I would look at it that way. So not just taking off, but what can you potentially add on or add value to in the program itself?
I really like that. I like the add value, because it is, the conversation so far has been a lot of like, oh, what can we take off? What can we take off? But this is allowing us to do strategic decision making in a way that we haven't before. And that's where we can create that added value, like never before. So how are you seeing organizations add value in that way?
What I think in like the maturity of organizations who first say, we're going to offload work so that we can free up space and time and energy for the right work. What I've seen organizations then do is start to reimagine what the experiential component of their event looks like, whether it is virtual or in person, and whether it is for an internal audience or for an external audience. So giving back the space for more creative work to understand and better personalize the experience of the event for their attendees. I think that has been more successful than just focusing on like work faster, like add more widgets to our plate, as Logan was mentioning.
I think that the creative piece is ultimately what matters. Like the attendee engagement, the attendee experience, that's what makes a great event, is like, how did the attendees feel? And so ultimately, if we can bring it back to that, that's what makes AI so important.
Yeah. So when you think about like, how did the attendees feel? There's a lot of conversation right now around personalization, right? So how are you, I like to say, like, hyper focused, hyper targeting those individual messages? Who are you communicating with? How are you communicating it? For things like Cvent, as an example, leveraging some of our Cvent IQ technology, right, throughout the event lifecycle, so that there is a helping hand, right, to those attendees. What does that look like? Is that, segmenting certain audiences, networking, right, with other people who have this similar specialities or, activities that they like to do. It just depends on the type of event you are, things that bringing people together through AI, right? Where in the past, we used to have to use spreadsheets and all kinds of information. Now we're summarizing, things that people enjoy or want to work towards, where you can group those people together. So there's a whole host of ways. We have the chatbot feature where you can go in and ask it a question. What's the attire? Things like that from the attendee side of the house. There's a lot of tools that we're trying to help support the planner too. So you get the best of both sides, I think. I don't know, from a personalization experience, Brittany or Mary, any more thoughts around how you see people using the tools to personalize the experience more?
What I think is, you touched on this a little bit, Logan, when you were talking about the segmentation. I think audience segmentation that can be dynamic and in the moment, because we have a lot of information of these individuals who you want to register up front, but then when they are actually interacting with the event, then you get some really important like first party data and information, and are able to make like fast fly decisions about what their experience looks like to tailor the next best action more accurately. And so I think that aspect of personalization, being able to segment your audience to serve up exactly what they would want next as you are getting real-time feedback about what they're experiencing, is very, very powerful.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Yeah. I think, well, the efficiency side, I think, is the most talked about. I think the personalization side personally has me the most excited, because and people have heard me say this a million times, but like, I really do think that this allows us to personalize at scale in a way that we've never been able to do before, in terms of just the quantity of, like, if I knew everyone's favorite color, which is not relevant, but that's the best example I can come off right now at the top of my head. And I wanted to include that in an email, to do that individually and every single email. And I know there's data tags and things like that, but like the ultra personalization, if I wanted to include that as a part of the process, would take endless amount of hours for 1,000, 2,000 attendees. And using AI to help populate that, you can do it in minutes, which is just unheard of. And that's where it's like really transforming, I think, how our jobs can be done and how the experiences are felt as well.
Well, I will just add, so a light bulb just went off, and reminder, I was actually talking to a member of my team the other day, and she was working on a training platform for a client that had a training session that had been recorded, and they needed it to be translated into like 15 different languages. And she was like, Logan, you have to check this out. It's so cool. Like, I was able to put it in the system, and then all the magic happened. And then I had, this session that had closed captioning in their language that she was sending back to the client. And there are 15 languages that they have to review and approve. But it was done in like an hour, let's say, just going in and putting it all together. versus something that would have taken somebody, a human, right, in a studio to apply, record, overlay the graphic on, the words, the closed captioning, like all of that, things like that, personalization and meeting those individuals where they are in their native language is core, right? It's super important. That's like one baseline thing that I think touches all of us, is when we can communicate together and we can understand each other better, like that makes us feel important too. So like, that's just one of the ways that we're seeing AI leveraged in the product, but then also outside of the product to meet people in their native language. It's core.
And from an accessibility standpoint as well. I think that's a very, very important distinction to make, Logan.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think that it allows us to be more accessible, create that connection where everyone's felt more welcome, and also just as from a marketing perspective, reach audiences that I would never have been able to reach because I don't speak German, but maybe what I'm working on resonates with my German audience. So I think it's a really cool, just tenfold of benefits that you can get from something as simple as that. Yes. When it comes to AI and personalization, I think a big piece of the conversation is data. And what data should we be getting? What data matters? How do we keep our data clean so it's getting the best outputs? What are you guys' opinions on how to think about data when it comes to AI and personalization and just enterprise workflows in general?
I think with big power comes big responsibility. I apocryphally attributed to I don't know who, but we have to be really good stewards of data. I think most people in their personal lives as consumers experience when data is misused and it feels like you are, being spammed or you're being targeted and you're saying, hey, this is not the way that I wish to be communicated with. So what I think practitioners in our industry have a responsibility, both from a compliance standpoint, but also like to have adherence to their attendees, is to be very transparent about where and how the data that we are asking for or that we have will be leveraged, and explicitly to do that to inform the best way to personalize the registration process and like not go beyond that. I think there was previously, we don't have enough data, we don't have enough information. And so there was an emphasis to like capture, get everything that we can. And now that is no longer the problem. Now it's kind of the inverse. We have a lot of information, but how do we sift through the noise to understand what actually is going to be relevant and what should carry forward into our next system or needs to be combined with this other data element in order to get the reporting or the next best action that we need. So my view is that just because we can doesn't mean we should. And so the personalization aspect, you've got to be very transparent with how you're using that. And obviously Cvent has the attestations and the terms and conditions that you can let all of the individuals who are registering for an event know, like this is how and when we will be using your data for these reasons. But I think giving visibility into how it will be used is very important.
Mm-hmm.
Yep, I love that. I also say with this personalization conversation that bad personalization hurts more than not personalizing at all. Like, I think I use this example. I don't know if you guys remember this, but from years and years ago, Target sent a personalized like diaper recommendation to someone's father before he knew that she was pregnant, and it caused all kinds of chaos in the household. And that was bad personalization that really hurt them and hurt the brand. And so you have to be careful with their data. And like you said, just because you have that information doesn't mean you should be using it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, since I know we only have about 14 minutes left, I'm going to take a second to switch into Q&A because we have some great questions. So let's start with the first question. Can either of you share an example of how AI has successfully streamlined workflows in the event planning lifecycle for a Fortune 500 company?
You want to take it, Logan, or you want me to?
Yeah, no, I want to think through the streamline the workflow piece. So clearly where automation can take place, right? We are seeing clients, again, it sounds as simple as mapping out your event life cycle, but trying to figure out where you can automate, right, activities, whether that be through workflow behind the scenes or, leveraging other AI tools, right? You need to just map it out and really identify what's going to make sense for your organization within the confines of what they have agreed to or want you to utilize it in. And that goes back to identifying the what, trying to figure out where it makes the most sense, and then really documenting that for your team too, and sharing that broadly. So, if you want me to give you like finite examples, I'll tell you, one of the areas that we've seen be very successful is in contract reviews, right? When you get the red line contracts back from the hotel and being able to review those contracts in a quicker, easier way. Other things like when you're looking at data analysis and reporting, whether that be through attendee feedback, right? If you're capturing a survey, how are you aggregating all of that feedback and be able to communicate that? And then if you could do it year over year, right? So you can identify areas of opportunity in the programming, those unique elements either in content or in experience, right? Things like that. Things like engagement metrics. So when you're thinking about, we see a lot of clients who hyper focus on that kind of cost and spend side. This new innovation and growth over the last probably 3 to 4 years is like, what is the other half of that circle, that full 360 view of data look like? When we're looking at engagement analytics, who did what? How did they respond? You could use it for A/B testing, right? And getting some analytics around that. To just really help you fine tune what you're doing today. That's kind of where I would say most of our large enterprise clients who are the Fortune 500 companies are starting to leverage the tool. They're using it for session descriptions and segmentation of, sessions, or also agendas, creating agendas, things that can take time in the tool itself to be able to deploy broadly to the attendees. We talked about the chat bot throughout. We talked about the networking tools. It really is identifying what data and how you want to communicate and where you can leverage that across your event lifecycle. Mary, I'll let you chime in if I missed anything.
No, you've covered it. What I think what is exciting in some of these organizations is to not only work faster on the current state, but to be able to be more predictive for the future. And so understanding as Logan mentioned, like the year over year registration trends, but using that information to have analysis that would say, okay, well, I would predict that we would have 50 people registered for this webinar 2 weeks out of time based on what we have historically done, and being able to better market based on this like predictive analytics tracking is also very useful. But otherwise, I think you've covered it. What I'll say though about this life cycle, and I keep using like my hand horizontally, and I think Logan, you do too. It's something that we on our team are so accustomed to working with customers about. We would be happy to have a like much more practical, tactical conversation with any of you, talking through what we would see as a typical discrete task across the life cycle, and show you all of the different jobs to be done that we typically consult and work with our customers on, to understand how it's done within your organization. But it's just some type of visual representation is very helpful to ground all of these conversations in.
Yeah, I mean, those are incredible examples shared. And I think it's a great point that like that's what your team is here for, is that we can create hypothetical ways that we've seen it used all day. But when you have experts that are built to come in, look at your workflows, look at where there's opportunities for automation and efficiency, then you can create that personalized experience for where to add it to your processes specifically and where it can really make an impact. I'm going to get to the next question, but before I do, because I know we're going to run out of time in a couple minutes, I just want to mention that for anyone joining today, if you'd like to receive a gift card for a demo, if you'd like to earn a $100 e-gift card, please sign up to complete a demo with us. there's going to be a button that pops up at the bottom of the screen. And so we'd love to get in front of you, talk to you more about this and our platform. And anyone outside of the US, the gift card can be available in any currency of your choosing. Okay, one more question for you guys before we run out of time. And I think that you kind of hit on this already, but what's the single biggest win from AI that you've discovered in day-to-day event planning meeting? Big question.
Okay, so I think the biggest win is not yet unlocked. So I think the biggest win is that we are still in the infancy period of how this can be used, and already organizations are seeing very big application, like ways to really transform the business. We had a different meeting Logan and I participated in on this same topic, and the discussion was, think about AI as a personal assistant for you. And when you think about like what a win it would be for me to have my own dedicated assistant who I could collaborate with, who I could train to understand the way that I like to receive information, the way that I like to send information, and help me synthesize all of the different ways that I get pinged and asked to do things. That is incredibly powerful. And so the biggest win is that like we are still in the early stages, and you can carve out like an assistant to be dedicated to you. And it's not something that you have to like go hire and get headcount for. Like it is a tool that is available for most individuals.
Yeah, so I'll be more specific because I think, Mary, I'm like a bajillion years older than you are. So for me, I think about the things where I am not as strong, right? Or don't have as great a confidence in. So things that get me a little itchy is when I have to write a number of session descriptions. And over time, I don't know about you all, but like sometimes they kind of sound the same when I'm writing them. So like if I'm able to go in and prompt and say, this is what we're doing, right? This is what we're trying to deliver. This is who's speaking. This is their background, right? And I can pull all of these things together, bios, speakers, everything together and say, write something that's 6 sentences long, and it spits it out. And then all I have to do is tweak it. That to me is like game changer. I would also tell you on the flip side, and I did talk about it earlier, but from the analytics side of the house, the predictive analytics, when your boss is asking you, boom, I need to know where you stand on this. And let's say it's not during your weekly report out and you've already sent out, your email communication, but they haven't read it, but they need it in as close to real time as possible. And you have new data because you just had an influx of registrations this week or something along those lines, or where are we with the attrition at the hotel? Being able to throw in that information and get predictive analytics in a very quick, simple way and just quickly double check that has been a game changer when I've practiced utilizing the tool most recently for me. And I know that others have felt really strongly about the sourcing side of the house and the contracts piece. Most recently, those are my 3 practicals. So single most, don't have it, just love it is what I tell you. I do. I just love it for certain things. I just love it.
No, I love that. I mean, who can narrow down to one? Everyone wants more information, wants more answers. So I love that. I love the analytics piece. To me, that's the part I'm weakest at my job. So that's where I could use the most improvement. But I also think, Mary, you made a really, really good point in that we're not getting creative enough yet. Like there are so many opportunities of where this can go in the future, and we need to stretch ourselves to think completely out of the box on how this can change our workflows. I think we might have time for one more question. We'll keep it brief. So it's fascinating to think about how AI is improving the attendee experience. How do you all see AI transforming event engagement in the future? And I know we kind of talked about this, but maybe we think a little bit farther out in terms of the future of event engagement.
I think registration is going to be quicker, easier, faster. I think being able to go in and utilize a bot or versus sending an email, right? Where am I supposed to be? Where am I supposed to go? Those sorts of things. Those are already kind of embedded in the technologies that, that we're seeing today. Things like meeting other people. I mean, a lot of the reasons why we get the dollars to go and attend these events is to either educate somebody or become informed ourselves, right? And so being able to practically and tactically drive that back home and say, this is the number of people I met, this is what I spoke to them about, or this is what I attended, and then being able to share that back with the team who was not able to attend. I think I see that as transforming kind of how we do what we do in the future with our attendees. I see other applications for the planner already, but that's kind of a couple of things. Mary, what do you think? Oh, I know one more. Just the ability to also, if somebody is excited and delighted about certain content, being able to leverage that to send them additive content, right, after the event. So keeping them engaged in your product, in your whatever you're trying to sell or do or communicate, keeping them engaged for a longer duration than just that moment in time when you're, presenting to them, but being able to kind of identify, well, if they like this, they may be interested in this. And so being able to kind of, again, think about targeting your audiences in a different way.
I agree with everything that you said, Logan. I think the hyper personalization will benefit the attendees in reducing some of the logistics back and forth. It can be kind of cumbersome to remember what time is my flight, how do I get to my hotel, where are the meals, those types of things. I think that AI will be able to serve those up to an individual in real time in a better mechanism. I think more of the attendees at events are digitally savvy to the extent that most individuals have a mobile phone, and so much more will be done on a mobile device than on the desktop in the future, and so that will empower better real-time notifications, as well as much better personalization for the agenda planning. What Cvent can do is, carry through the attendee profile so that, hey, these were the interests and this is how you networked at the previous conference with us that you attended this year. Like, these same connections will be here again. But I think of that to the nth degree, whereby we'll have a wealth of information about previous attendees and also then use that to curate the most bespoke agenda for a new attendee to say, based on what we know about you, this is how we think you will maximize your time spent here. And we will reduce the burden for logistics for you by serving up the notifications for you, or having one agent interface, one chatbot that you can interact with for all types of question, both content and related to travel if it's an in-person meeting, as well as the proper follow-ups and the synthesis of, you participated in this meeting for only 5-10 minutes. You actually sat through this entire webinar for 45 minutes. So here's the relevant information. Here's the nuggets that you might have missed, and better package that up, as well as send additional content. So I think the way that we interact with the attendees pre, during, and post will continue to change with the personalization, and it will be more meeting them where they are, which today is more likely on their phone.
Mm-hmm.
I love that. I think those are wonderful answers and a great way to wrap up this webinar. Thank you both so much for joining me today. I think this is a great discussion. Hopefully you all watching loved it as much as I did. But thank you so much, and keep a lookout for anyone interested on part 3 of our enterprise, our AI series. I think it's going to have a similar-ish topic in terms of thinking about AI when it comes to an enterprise organization and how to roll out AI. So thank you, everyone, and have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you.